The night was quiet, but Sandra's heart was loud. She was sitting alone in a small cafe in downtown Los Angeles, her phone face down on the table. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, but she felt miles away from the world that adored her. She had walked away from a film set earlier that day, her smile still painted on for the cameras, but her soul aching beneath it. Fame was supposed to be a dream, yet tonight it felt like a heavy mask. She sipped her tea slowly, unsure if she was running from the noise or from herself. 5 minutes before closing, a gentle voice interrupted the quiet. "Is this seat taken?" It was Keanu, wearing a plain black hoodie. No entourage, no pretense. His eyes carried the same warmth she had always seen on screen, but tonight they held something else. Concern. Sandra managed a small laugh. "Not unless you count my invisible friend," she said, trying to sound light. He sat across from her, his presence calm but undeniable. The hook came when he placed a folded paper on the table. "I wasn't going to show you this tonight," he said, "but I think you need to see it." She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she opened it. It was a photo, young Keanu, barely out of his teens, standing with two smiling people she didn't recognize. Behind them, a hand-painted sign read, "Free meals for anyone in need." Sandra looked up, confused. "Those are my parents," Keanu said quietly. "Before anyone knew my name, they used to feed strangers outside a small diner. I think you should meet them." Sandra blinked. "Why me?" she asked. Keanu leaned forward. "Because you've been giving pieces of yourself to the world for years, and you're starting to believe there's nothing left. They'll remind you that kindness isn't about what the world takes. It's about what you choose to give." She felt her chest tighten. There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretches between two souls who suddenly understand each other. Outside, a distant siren wailed. But inside the cafe, the world stood still. The next evening, she found herself standing in front of a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Pasadena. The porch light flickered weakly, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. She almost turned back. The idea of meeting Keanu's parents felt too personal, too intimate. But something in his voice last night, soft, certain, had anchored her here. She knocked. The door creaked open, and a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes appeared. Her sweater was worn but clean, and her smile was the kind that could melt walls. "You must be Sandra," she said, as if she had been expecting her for years. "Come in, dear." Inside, the house was warm, decorated with old photographs, hand-sewn quilts, and shelves of well-loved books. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. A man with a gentle face and strong hands rose from an armchair. "So this is the woman our son can't stop talking about," he said, his tone playful but sincere. They talked for hours, about childhood dreams, small-town diners, and the quiet heroes no one writes headlines about. Sandra found herself laughing freely, the weight on her shoulders lifting in pieces she hadn't known were there. But then, as midnight approached, a question slipped out that she hadn't planned. "How did you stay kind?" she asked softly. "When the world isn't always kind back?" Keanu's father glanced at his wife, then back at Sandra. "Because someone was kind to us when we didn't deserve it," he said. "We learned that a single act can save a life even if no one ever knows." His words hit her like a wave, but before she could ask what he meant, a sudden knock rattled the door. The three of them exchanged looks. It was late. The knock came again, urgent. Keanu's mother opened the door to reveal a young man, drenched from the unexpected rain, clutching a worn backpack. His voice shook. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." The tension in the room rose instantly. Sandra's heart thumped, curiosity and unease mixing inside her. Keanu's father stepped forward slowly. "It's all right, son. You're safe here. Come inside." The young man stepped in, water pooling at his feet. He glanced at Sandra, recognition flickering in his eyes, then back at Keanu's parents. "I think you saved my life once," he whispered. The room fell silent. The air seemed to thicken, every breath held. Sandra's mind raced. Who was this stranger, and what secret was about to unfold in this humble home? She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The story she had stumbled into would challenge everything she thought she knew about kindness, resilience, and the quiet power of unseen acts. The room was still, except for the faint drip of rain from the young man's soaked jacket onto the wooden floor. Sandra could hear the rhythmic ticking of an old clock on the mantel, each second sounding louder than it should. She had been on countless film sets where suspense was carefully crafted. But this was different. This was real, raw, and unedited. Keanu's mother gently guided the stranger toward a chair near the fireplace. Her movements were unhurried, like someone who had practiced kindness long enough for it to become instinct. "You're safe," she said again, her voice warm enough to cut through the tension. "Sit, child. You're shivering." He hesitated, glancing around the cozy living room, at the faded photographs on the walls, the crackling fire, and Sandra's curious face. He looked almost afraid to speak, as though words themselves might break the fragile moment. Finally, he said quietly, "You gave me soup when I was 15, outside the diner. I hadn't eaten in 2 days." Keanu's father's eyes softened. "There were a lot of kids we gave soup to," he said gently. "But you remember?" The young man nodded, his fingers twisting the strap of his backpack. "I didn't just remember. I survived because of it. I was going to do something terrible that night. But that bowl of soup, it stopped me." Sandra felt a lump forming in her throat. She had spent years acting out dramatic moments for cameras, but hearing the trembling honesty in this man's voice struck her deeper than any script ever could. She glanced at Keanu's mother, who was quietly pouring tea as if she had heard stories like this before, as if the extraordinary had always been part of their ordinary lives. The young man opened his backpack slowly, his hands shaking. From inside, he pulled out a small wooden box. Its surface was scratched and worn, but the way he held it suggested it carried something precious. "I've been looking for you for years," he said. "I didn't know your names. I only remembered the diner sign and the kindness in your faces. I built a better life because of that night. But I kept this." He placed the box on the table, and for a moment no one reached for it. Sandra's curiosity burned, but she didn't dare interrupt. Keanu's father opened it carefully, revealing an old photograph of a teenage boy standing outside the diner, a faint, hopeful smile on his face, despite the rain in the picture. Tucked beside the photo was a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. "I wrote this the morning after you helped me," the young man whispered. "I promised myself that if I ever found you, I'd give it back." Keanu's mother unfolded the note. Her hands trembled slightly as she read silently, her lips pressing together. She passed it to her husband, whose brow furrowed as he read. Finally, he handed it to Sandra. The words were simple, written in uneven handwriting. "To the kind strangers who gave me soup, I don't know your names, but you saved my life. Someday I will do something good for someone else because of you." Sandra felt tears sting her eyes. She looked at the young man, who now seemed both vulnerable and unbreakable. "What happened to you after that night?" she asked softly. He took a deep breath. "I left the streets. I found work. I studied. And tonight, I came here because I saw Keanu on TV once talking about the diner. I tracked down the town. I didn't think you'd even remember." Keanu's father reached across the table, placing a firm, steady hand on the young man's shoulder. "We don't need you to repay anything," he said quietly. "But I'm glad you came." For a moment, the room was filled with a deep, unspoken connection, a web of small choices and quiet kindnesses stretching across years. Sandra realized she was holding her breath. Then the young man's voice broke the silence again. "There's something else," he said. "I didn't just come to thank you. I came to warn you." Sandra's eyes widened. The rain outside seemed to grow heavier, as if the world itself was leaning in to listen. Keanu's mother frowned gently. "Warn us?" he nodded. "Someone is looking for you. Or maybe for your son. I overheard something. People talking about a plan that involves your family." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't have the details, but..." It didn't sound safe. The warmth of the room seemed to fade, replaced by a subtle chill. Sandra felt her heart quicken. The easy laughter from earlier now felt like a memory, fragile and far away. She glanced at the photograph on the wall of a younger Keanu, wondering what kind of trouble could reach a family as humble as this. Keanu's father leaned back slowly, his face unreadable. "Our family has no enemies," he said, though his tone suggested caution rather than certainty. "But thank you for telling us." Sandra caught the flicker of something in his eyes. Concern, maybe even fear. She had seen that look before, in scenes where characters realized their pasts weren't as buried as they believed. The young man looked down at his hands. "I wish I knew more," he whispered. "But if kindness saved my life once, then maybe warning you can save yours." As thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Sandra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had come here expecting a quiet evening, maybe a heartwarming story or two. Instead, she felt the ground shift beneath her, as if the universe had just revealed a new layer of itself. She didn't know what danger lurked outside that small house, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't walk away now. The night stretched on, heavy with unanswered questions. As the fire crackled and the clock ticked, each second a reminder that something unseen was already moving toward them. The rain did not stop through the night. By morning, gray clouds still pressed low against the horizon, and the air outside the small house felt heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Sandra stood by the window holding a warm mug of tea that Keanu's mother had quietly placed in her hands. She watched droplets race down the glass, but her mind replayed the stranger's warning again and again. Behind her, the young man sat slumped at the kitchen table, his eyes red from exhaustion. He had stayed the night on the couch, though he had offered to leave. Keanu's father insisted he stay until the storm cleared. Now, as the soft clink of dishes filled the silence, Sandra realized just how fragile the calm felt. Keanu's mother broke the quiet with a gentle tone. "Storms have a way of testing what we're made of," she said, placing a basket of bread on the table. She looked at Sandra and the young man. "Sometimes they wash away what doesn't matter, and sometimes they reveal what does." Sandra forced a small smile, but she could feel her heart tightening. In her career, she had faced critics, scandals, and heartbreak. But this felt different, like stepping into a story where the ending had not yet been written. She found herself wondering if meeting Keanu's parents had been chance or destiny. As the day wore on, the stranger, who introduced himself as Lucas, began to open up. He spoke haltingly, each word carefully chosen, as if some memories were too sharp to touch. He told them about the night years ago, when despair had nearly taken him, about the bowl of soup that changed everything, and about the small victories that had followed. The part-time job washing dishes, the mentor who gave him a chance, the college scholarship he had nearly turned down out of fear. But then his voice lowered. "Last week," Lucas said, "I overheard two men in a coffee shop in San Diego. They were talking about someone connected to Hollywood, someone with a past they could exploit. They mentioned a diner in Pasadena, and a family who once fed strangers. It didn't make sense at first, but when I saw a news clip of Keanu mentioning his parents and that diner, I realized they were talking about you." Keanu's father rubbed his temples slowly. "People say a lot of things," he murmured, though his eyes flicked toward the window, scanning the quiet street as if expecting shadows to move. Sandra felt her stomach knot. "What kind of plan?" "Did they say what they wanted?" Lucas shook his head. "Only that it could bring down someone powerful if they played it right. They seemed excited, almost desperate. I don't know if it's about money, revenge, or something else." The room seemed to shrink around them. The sound of the rain against the roof grew louder, like an insistent drumbeat. Sandra set down her mug and stood, pacing. "This isn't just about Keanu," she said. "Someone could be targeting your family because of what they stand for." Keanu's mother looked up at Sandra, her expression steady. "Kindness doesn't always make friends," she said softly. "Sometimes it makes enemies of those who thrive on cruelty." The words settled heavily between them. Lucas reached into his backpack again, this time pulling out a small notebook. "I wrote down everything I remembered from that conversation," he said, handing it to Sandra. Inside were messy notes, names half heard, fragments of places: Harbor Street, old billboard, midnight meeting. One word stood out in bold letters: ledger. Sandra's fingers traced the word. "A ledger," she whispered. "Why would they need a ledger?" Keanu's father's eyes darkened slightly. "Years ago," he said, Before Keanu's success, we kept a handwritten ledger of every free meal we gave. Not for credit, but so we'd remember the names of people we prayed for. If someone found that, they might twist it. Lucas looked startled. So it's real? It's in a box in the attic, Keanu's mother admitted. But it's nothing more than memories and prayers. The wind outside howled suddenly, rattling the old windows. Sandra jumped slightly, her nerves already frayed. She turned to Lucas. If they're after that ledger, we need to protect it. Or at least see what's in it. They climbed the creaky attic stairs together. The air grew colder as they reached the dusty space. Old trunks, quilts, and cardboard boxes lined the walls. Keanu's father pulled a wooden chest from the corner, its hinges stiff with age. Inside, neatly stacked pages rested beneath faded photographs. Sandra picked up the top sheet. The handwriting was small and careful, rows of names, dates, and brief notes. Some names had hearts drawn beside them. Some had small crosses. She felt an unexpected pang of emotion as she realized each entry was a person who had been seen, even in their lowest moment as she flipped through the pages. Her hand paused on an entry circled twice. Marcus Ellis, June 17th, said he would return a kindness someday. Her eyes narrowed. Marcus Ellis, she said aloud. Does that name mean anything? Keanu's father froze, then exchanged a glance with his wife. Marcus was a drifter, he said carefully. But he wasn't unkind. He disappeared one winter. We never knew what happened to him. Before Sandra could respond, Lucas's phone buzzed on the attic floor. He glanced at the screen and the color drained from his face. Unknown number, he whispered. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. You should have stayed silent, Lucas. Kindness won't save them this time. The line went dead. For a moment, no one moved. The attic seemed to hold its breath, the dust motes in the dim light frozen mid-air. Sandra felt a chill run through her spine. Someone out there knew Lucas had warned them. Someone was watching. Keanu's father closed the chest slowly, his hands steady, even as his jaw tightened. We're not going to panic, he said firmly, though his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. We'll think this through. Sandra looked around at the quiet attic, at the faded photos of a younger Keanu and his parents, at the names on the ledger pages that spoke of decades of compassion. She realized that this was more than a threat about a book of names. This was a challenge to everything the family believed in, that kindness could ripple through time, changing lives unseen. Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. They're coming for that ledger. And deep inside her, Sandra knew this wasn't just their fight now. It was hers, too. The storm had finally passed, but the air outside was heavy and damp, as if the world was waiting for something to happen. Sandra woke early, the faint light of dawn slipping through the curtains, casting pale stripes across the wooden floor. She sat up slowly on the couch, the events of the night replaying like scenes from a film she couldn't turn off. Lucas was already awake at the kitchen table, staring at his phone as if it might give him answers. Keanu's mother was humming softly in the kitchen, her hands busy kneading dough for bread. Her calm movement seemed almost out of place after the threatening call they had received, but Sandra noticed how her shoulders stiffened every time the floor creaked or the wind rattled the window. Keanu's father stood by the doorway, gazing at the quiet street outside, his arms crossed, his posture protective. You didn't sleep, Sandra said quietly to Lucas. Joining him at the table? Couldn't, he replied, his voice hoarse. I keep thinking about that voice. They knew my name. They knew I warned you. He looked up, guilt flickering in his eyes. I'm sorry if I put you in danger. Keanu's father turned, his voice firm but kind. You didn't bring danger. You brought a warning. That's a different thing. The sound of a car door slamming outside broke the fragile calm. Sandra's pulse quickened. She peered through the lace curtain. A dark sedan sat across the street, its windows tinted. Two figures were inside, unmoving. Her chest tightened. They're watching, she whispered. Keanu's father's jaw clenched, but he stepped back from the window calmly, as if refusing to give whoever was out there the satisfaction of fear. Then we go on with our day, he said. Fear feeds on reaction. But the tension was undeniable. Even as Keanu's mother set bread to rise and poured tea, the house seemed to hold its breath. Sandra found herself pacing, her mind flipping between memories of Hollywood red carpets and this small kitchen where real stakes now lived. Fame had taught her to handle cameras, critics, and whispers, but this was different. This was shadowy, unseen, and dangerous. By mid-morning, Lucas suggested moving the ledger. "They're after the book," he said. "If we hide it somewhere unpredictable, maybe we'll have time to figure out who's behind this." Keanu's father hesitated. "That ledger isn't just paper. It's a history of people who trusted us. Moving it feels like erasing their stories." "Protecting it isn't erasing it," Sandra said gently. "It's honoring it." They decided to take the ledger to a place no one would expect, the abandoned diner where Keanu's parents had once fed strangers. It had closed years ago, but the building still stood on a quiet street. Its paint faded, its sign tilted. The drive was tense. The dark sedan didn't follow, but Sandra couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on them. Lucas drove his old car, the ledger wrapped in a blanket on the back seat. Keanu's father sat beside him, quiet and watchful, while Sandra and Keanu's mother whispered in the back. When they reached the diner, memories seemed to linger in the air. The windows were dusty, but the inside looked almost unchanged. Faded menus on the walls, a cracked tile floor, a few chairs stacked against the counter. Keanu's mother touched the counter with trembling fingers. "We fed so many here," she murmured. "Hope lived in these walls once." As Lucas searched for a hiding spot, Sandra noticed a framed photo on the floor, half covered in dust. It was of a younger Keanu, smiling wide, a bowl of soup in his hands. Beside him was another boy, one she didn't recognize, but his face felt important, familiar somehow. She tucked the photo under her arm without a word. They decided to hide the ledger inside an old metal compartment beneath the diner's counter. Lucas slid it into place, his hands shaking slightly, then replaced the loose panel. "It's safe here," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. On their way back to the car, a sound broke the stillness, the crunch of gravel under footsteps. Sandra's heart leapt. A man in a dark jacket stepped out from behind the diner, his face shadowed by a baseball cap. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his tone casual but edged with threat. Keanu's father stepped forward, his presence steady. "We're just visiting an old place," he said evenly. The man smirked. "Places like this hold memories, and sometimes things worth more than memories." His gaze flicked to Lucas. "You should have stayed gone, kid." Lucas's face paled. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step closer. "Tell your friend Keanu his parents' generosity has a price. We'll collect soon." Then, without warning, he turned and vanished behind the diner, disappearing into the alley like a ghost. Sandra's legs felt weak. She leaned against the car door, trying to steady her breathing. "They know everything," she whispered. As they drove back, the sky began to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds. But the brightness felt hollow. Inside the car, no one spoke. The silence carried a weight heavier than words. Back at the house, Sandra pulled out the dusty photo she had taken from the diner. Under the better light, she studied the second boy's face again. Something clicked. She had seen that face years ago in a charity article about a tech entrepreneur who had mysteriously vanished after a scandal. "Marcus Ellis," she breathed. Keanu's mother's eyes widened. "That's Marcus?" Lucas frowned. "You said he disappeared." "We thought he did," Keanu's father said quietly. "If he's alive, maybe he's the key to this." As the afternoon faded, the phone rang suddenly, startling them all. Keanu's mother answered, her voice calm at first, but then shaking. She handed the receiver to Sandra. A familiar voice came through the line, gentle, almost regretful. "Sandra, this isn't about money. It's about a promise Keanu's parents kept, a promise someone powerful wants buried. If you stay, you'll be in danger. If you walk away now, you might save yourself." The line went dead before she could respond. Sandra stood frozen, the weight of the choice pressing against her chest. She glanced at Lucas, at Keanu's parents, at the quiet house that now felt like the center of something much larger. She knew she couldn't leave, not now. Kindness had pulled her into this story, and kindness wouldn't let her walk out. Outside, the dark sedan had returned. Its engine idled quietly, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The dark sedan lingered outside as evening settled over the quiet street. The sound of its engine was faint but steady, like a reminder that the threat was never far away. Sandra stood near the window, watching the faint glow of its headlights against the rain-damp pavement. She didn't speak at first, afraid her voice might betray the unease knotting her stomach. Keanu's mother joined her, her hand lightly touching Sandra's shoulder. "Don't let them see fear," she whispered. "Fear is what they're counting on." Her calm tone belied the tightness around her eyes. Lucas was at the table, sketching rough maps of the diner and the neighborhood, trying to figure out how the strangers could have followed them. Keanu's father paced slowly, his mind clearly working through old memories and connections. Sandra broke the silence. "They aren't just watching. They're waiting for something, maybe for us to panic." Lucas nodded grimly. "If they're patient, it means they already have part of what they want. Or they think we're predictable." He tapped his pen against the map. "We have to be unpredictable." Keanu's father paused. "What if we don't hide?" he said quietly. "What if we show them we're not afraid to stand by what's right?" His words carried a weight that settled over the room. Sandra admired his resolve but knew the danger was real. She thought about the warning voice on the phone, about the photo of Marcus Ellis, about the ledger in the diner's counter. Pieces of a larger puzzle were forming, but the picture was still unclear. As dusk deepened, a knock rattled the door. Everyone froze. The knock came again, softer this time. Keanu's mother approached carefully, her voice steady. "Who is it?" A familiar voice answered, a voice they hadn't expected. "It's Marcus." The name sent a shock through the room. Sandra exchanged a stunned look with Lucas before Keanu's father opened the door. There stood Marcus Ellis, older now, with streaks of gray in his hair and lines of regret etched into his face. He wore a weathered jacket and carried nothing but a small messenger bag. "You're alive," Keanu's mother whispered. Marcus gave a faint, weary smile. "Barely, but I had to come." He stepped inside, glancing warily toward the street. "They're closer than you think." Lucas stared at him. "Who are they? What do they want?" Marcus sank into a chair, his shoulders slumping as if he'd been carrying a burden for years. "Years ago, when your parents fed us all at that diner," he began, "they didn't just give soup. They gave information to people who had none. They helped connect runaways with shelters, veterans with jobs, kids with scholarships. They wrote it all down in that ledger." He took a shaky breath. Someone powerful was on that list, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. A name tied to a scandal no one ever uncovered. Sandra's pulse quickened. "And now they're afraid the ledger will expose them." Marcus nodded. "Yes, they've been looking for it for years. They thought I had it once, and I nearly lost my life because of it. I disappeared to protect your family." Keanu's father's voice was quiet but firm. "We never betrayed anyone's trust. The ledger was never meant for harm." Marcus looked at him sadly. "But they don't care about intent. They care about control. And now they know Lucas warned you. They'll move soon." Sandra felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. The danger was no longer distant. It was right outside their door. She glanced out the window again. The sedan was gone now, but that absence felt worse than its presence. "We need proof of what's in the ledger," Lucas said suddenly. "If we can copy it, maybe we can protect the information before they destroy it." Marcus shook his head. "That would make you a bigger target." Keanu's mother stepped forward. "No, hiding doesn't protect anyone. Sharing the truth does." Her voice, though gentle, was unshakable. Sandra looked between them. "Then we go back to the diner, tonight." The decision was made without another word. Under the cover of darkness, they drove back to the diner. The town was quiet, the streets slick from the day's rain. Their headlights cut narrow paths through the fog, making the world outside seem small and fragile. Inside the diner, the air was cold and stale. Lucas pried open the compartment beneath the counter, retrieving the ledger with careful hands. Marcus opened it and began flipping through the pages, his brow furrowing as he searched. Halfway through, his finger stopped. He tapped a name circled in red ink, an influential business mogul whose public image was spotless. This is the name they're protecting, Marcus said grimly. If this gets out, it changes everything. Before Sandra could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the diner. Multiple footsteps. The door creaked, then swung open. Figures in dark jackets stepped inside, their faces shadowed by hoods. The leader spoke with a low, controlled voice. "Hand over the ledger and no one gets hurt." Keanu's father stepped forward, his posture calm but unyielding. "This ledger isn't yours to take." The man's lips curled into a smirk. "Everything has a price." Lucas glanced at Sandra, his eyes wide but steady. Marcus quietly slipped the photo of the mogul's name into his pocket without being noticed. Sandra saw the move and understood. If the ledger was taken, at least the truth wouldn't be entirely lost. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded outside, the dark sedan's alarm blaring. The men flinched. Marcus seized the moment, grabbing a metal chair and swinging it toward the nearest figure. Chaos erupted. Sandra ducked behind the counter as Lucas shoved the ledger toward Keanu's father. A struggle broke out, the sounds of scuffling boots and shattering glass filling the diner. Keanu's mother, calm even in danger, pulled Sandra to her feet. "This isn't the end," she whispered, her eyes fierce. "This is just the part where we decide who we are." As they bolted through the diner's back door into the foggy night, the ledger clutched tightly in Keanu's father's hands. Sandra felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Headlights flickered in the distance, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw another car, one she recognized, pulling up fast. Someone else had entered the game. Fog swirled around the narrow alley behind the diner, the cool night air thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Sandra's breaths came fast as she ran, the sound of hurried footsteps echoing behind them. Lucas clutched Marcus's arm to keep him moving, while Keanu's father held the ledger tight against his chest, guarding it like a fragile treasure. Behind them, angry shouts rose, the men from the diner giving chase. The headlights Sandra had glimpsed earlier cut through the mist, and for a moment she feared they were trapped between two threats. But as the car pulled closer, a familiar figure stepped out. Keanu himself, his face lit by the glow of the dashboard lights, worry etched deep into his features. "Get in," he called, his voice urgent but steady. They piled into the car, slamming the doors just as two of the pursuers rounded the corner. Keanu hit the gas, the tires squealing on wet pavement as they sped away. The city lights blurred past as the car wove through empty streets, the tension in the cabin almost unbearable. Sandra glanced at Keanu, her chest tight. "You came." "My parents called before the line went dead," he said, his hands gripping the wheel. "I drove straight here. Tell me what's happening," Marcus quickly explained. The ledger, the name, the threat that had haunted them for years. Keanu listened silently, his jaw tightening with each word. When Marcus revealed the powerful mogul's name, Keanu's expression darkened, not with anger, but with a deep sadness. They stopped at an overlook above the city, the skyline glittering below like scattered jewels. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and quiet determination. Keanu's father opened the ledger again, flipping through its pages slowly. "This isn't just a list of meals," he said softly. "It's a map of every moment kindness changed a life." Keanu nodded. "And that's why they're afraid of it," he said. "Because kindness isn't just soft, it's powerful. It remembers." Lucas looked out at the city lights. "If we go public, they'll come after us harder. But if we stay silent, they'll erase the proof and the people behind it." Sandra felt her throat tighten. "What if we don't expose anyone directly?" she said quietly. "What if we tell the story without names? Just the truth about what kindness can do? We could share the parts that matter without putting anyone in danger." Keanu's mother smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Stories can be shields and swords at the same time." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo he'd hidden earlier, the proof of the mogul's name. He looked at it for a long moment, then tore a small corner from the edge. "I'll keep this piece," he said. "Not to use for revenge, but as a reminder that even powerful people can be changed by small acts." He handed the rest to Keanu's father. "Burn it. The world doesn't need more destruction, it needs more light." They built a small fire in a rusted metal barrel near the overlook. The scraps of paper curled and blackened, sparks rising into the night sky like tiny stars. As the last ember faded, Keanu wrapped an arm around his parents, holding them close. Lucas stood quietly beside them, his eyes damp but hopeful. In the days that followed, Sandra and Keanu worked quietly with trusted journalists to craft a story, not a scandal, but a celebration of anonymous kindness. The article, published without revealing identities, spoke of a humble diner where two ordinary people had fed the hungry, given hope to the lost, and unknowingly saved lives that would later change the world. The piece went viral, not because of gossip or controversy, but because people saw themselves in it. Readers shared their own stories of small mercies: a teacher who stayed late to tutor, a stranger who returned a lost wallet, a neighbor who offered shelter in a storm. Kindness began to trend, not as a hashtag, but as an action. A week later, Keanu invited Sandra to join him at a small community center his parents supported. Children were painting a mural on the wall, a river of stars flowing through a night sky. One little boy handed Sandra a paintbrush. "We're adding wishes," he said. "What's yours?" She dipped the brush in blue paint, her hand trembling slightly. "My wish," she said softly, "is that kindness never has to hide again." Keanu's parents stood nearby, watching the children laugh and paint, their faces glowing with quiet pride. Marcus helped Lucas set up a shelf of donated books, his once hidden life now steady and purposeful. Keanu approached Sandra, his voice gentle. "When you walked into that cafe, I thought you just needed a friend. I didn't know you'd remind all of us why kindness matters." Tears welled in her eyes. "Your parents reminded me. You reminded me. Maybe now we'll remind the world." The sound of children's laughter filled the room as the mural grew brighter, each brushstroke a testament to the power of unseen acts. Outside, the city bustled on, unaware that a quiet revolution of kindness had begun in a small diner and a single shared bowl of soup. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet, Sandra stepped back to admire the mural. In its flowing river of stars, she saw more than paint. She saw every moment that had led to this one, every choice, every act of compassion that had rippled outward until it reached her. She turned to Keanu, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't the end, is it?" He smiled, his eyes warm. "No, it's just the beginning." And for the first time in a long while, Sandra believed it.